Hi, I'm Doug here at Global West, and today we're going to do an installation of subframe connectors on a 1993 Mustang. What I happen to have on the table are three primary kits that we use on a 93 Mustang. In fact, this will fit 79 all the way through 93. First part number is a 912. This is your main subframe. This goes from bulkhead to bulkhead. Then we have a 915 kit, which is these parts right here, and those are jacking rails. And you may or may not know what a jacking rail is, but when you install jacking rails on your car, this means that you can put your floor jack anywhere on these rails and lift the vehicle up without damaging the floor. And then we also have another kit here called a 920, and this happens to be seat support braces, something the Mustang could use even from the factory. And what we do is when you put this main subframe in, the 912, and you put these brackets on, it ties the back two bolts of your seat into the subframe and makes it very stable to stop some of that floor from flexing, which is real important on those particular years. So let's take a minute, go out back, and show you how to install the 912, the 915, and the 920 kit on a 93 Mustang. All right, so we're going to install the subframes. Now this is a 93 Mustang. The subframe connectors that we have are going to go from the rear bulkhead, and they're going to go the full length all the way to the front bulkhead right here. That's the strongest point on these particular cars. So we want to tie into that with our subframe connector and span the whole distance. We're not going to do a short subframe which ties on here. We want to go full length. So the subframe connector is going to butt up to the back bulkhead right here. And as you can see how far it goes. Now on this side we've got brake lines and fuel lines. So we're going to have to adjust those. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to pop the bracket here to allow these to shift a little bit. And right here there's a couple of clips that'll pop off, and right here there's a bolt. And what we're going to do is we're going to shift these lines over so we can get the subframe connector up. Once we get the subframe connector installed, then the lines actually go back over the top of the subframe and they're well protected. Now another thing we're going to do is we're going to install the seat brackets. These are supports. The reason why we do that is because these particular models had a problem, and there's a Ford bulletin on this. Over a period of time, the actual floor would start to crack, and you would have seams right along the edge here where it would start to drop down. It would literally crack. And they have replacement panels and stuff for that. Well, for preventive maintenance, if we put these brackets in and tie it into the subframe connector, we eliminate that problem. So let us show you how we're going to put this subframe connector on with these. Now one more thing we're going to do is this particular client wants us to put the jacking rails on as well. And the jacking rails go out to the outer seam here, and there's crossbars that tie into the main subframe. And once we get all that installed, you can put your floor jack anywhere on the jacking rail or on this stuff and lift the entire car without damaging anything. Okay, one other thing we have to do is there's a little clamp up in this area here on that line that holds these three lines right here. And we are going to need to loosen this up or remove it so we can slide it over far enough. And then this will go back on after we get the subframe. Now that we got the clamp off, it makes this a little easier to move. And all we need to do is bend them over. See that right there? I just need to get them out of the way so that when I put my subframe up into here, this will go up flat. This is going to go all the way up into the bulkhead. That'll be flush. We've got to clean the floor area where we're going to be doing some welding. And there's a bracket, this right here, is going to weld right here. So we're going to go ahead and mark our area, and we'll mark the subframe because we have to buff the powder coat off the subframe as well. Our next step will be to buff all this, and then we're going to show you how this seat support goes on. And it actually ties in right here to your back seat bolts. And we give you hardware for this. Once you get this position, your bracket is going to weld to our subframe. Okay, you see how this goes? That notch. So there's another area where we got to buff the paint off right there. Because once this all goes together, this is going to be welded to this. Now that we've got that positioned, you're going to do this to both sides. Now, this side is the hardest side because it happens to have the fuel lines and brake lines. The other side is easy. There's no lines involved. So let's get both sides prepped, ready to go, and then we'll take it from there. You may notice we've already installed the longer seat bolts. They drop down, as you can see here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our bracket, we're going to go ahead and put this up where it needs to go, like this. And we're going to tack weld in the back here and tack weld the subframe up front and get our position so we can mount this properly. Now you want to weld a good portion of this on both sides if you can. You won't be able to get all the way around. In this particular case, we want to make sure that this is correctly positioned on here so it does, when we drop this down, nothing moves. So you'll have substantial welding right here. If all you were doing is putting our subframe connector on with the seat support, you're there. Drop this down, you're going to weld all the way around. I would suggest painting this area right here. You're going to put this back up, and now you're going to start welding here, here, and you've got this support gusset that goes to the middle of the floor that goes here, and all this is going to be welded. The fuel lines and everything go right above. They'll tuck real nice. You don't have to worry about it. There'll be a couple of bolts you install in the front there, which is what you took off for the little brackets. Put those back on, and this side's done. And then you go to the other side, and it's the same procedure, except it's easier because you don't have the fuel lines and brake lines. But for us, our next step now is we're going to put the jacking rails on. So because we're going to do this, we're going to leave this right here for now because there's some measuring we have to do. And we're going to come over here and we're going to pop these pop rivets right here, drop these lines down and over a little bit because we have a rail that has to go up inside here. We also have to look at, there's caulking up inside here in the seam. We've got to make sure that the caulking does not hold the jacking rail down. So we're going to be cleaning up some of that as well so that rail fits nice and tight along the floor. So now we're ready to clamp this to the floor seam. Got it?
Got it.
All right, so let me go ahead and clamp this here. Now that we got that in position, we're going to go ahead and we're going to measure it off for our crossbars. So our first measurement is going to be 14.5 inches. So you measure from the front, come back 14.5. You're going to mark your tube. The next one is 34.5. That's going to be your center line. And the next one is going to be at 52. Again, mark your center line. In your kit, those cross tubes, you get 6 of them. They're mitered on one side. So the miter goes to the tube, of course, but you're going to have to trim. They're deliberately longer, and you're going to have to trim them to fit. We'll mark our angle cut that we need to do, cut them, and we'll fit them, and we'll show you how that goes. So you've got your points that we've laid out, and you can see real quick how they go. They just lay in there like this. And we pull these down so we can measure and what have you. But here's the deal. The next step is for us to tack weld these here and here. Obviously we can't do this with this hanging below. These lines, we have to position these above the tubes and then we tack it. We're going to tack weld the first one here, which is clear of the lines. So we'll do that one first, then we'll do the second one, and then we'll do the last one. And you got to be real careful around these lines. Okay, one of the things you want to do before you take the subframe off is we're going to put the point where the jack attaches. On these Fox bodies, there's an area that's got a little notch for your jack to go in if you ever have a flat tire. With these jacking rails, we're going to go ahead and put these tabs underneath where that used to be, because when you put the jacking rail in, you're going to lose that position. So with these little tabs, we're going to reposition it again, and that's what you see us doing right now. There'll be one in the front and one in the rear. We're going to drop the whole assembly now, and we're going to take it to the welding bench. We're going to weld everything up on the top side, put the gussets in, and get it all ready to go. We're going to paint the top and most of the subframe before we do the final welding. See how we put the gussets in? In the instruction sheet, you'll see exactly how to do that. Got our tabs welded on. We painted the other side. So now all we really have to do is get this up. We're going to bolt it in, have these all above it, and get this positioned, re-clamp it, and get ready to weld it to the car. So I don't want to tighten these down just yet. I want to get this clamped and pulled over to the seam over here before I tighten these down. So the main thing is just getting them up and resting on here, and now we're going to clamp it. Okay, so we're going to start welding now. And one of the things is we got all the lines up here. Everything is away. You know, it's up against the floor, but now we're going to do some welding up in this area, and there's lines right here, and we have to pull these away when we weld in this area. We want to keep these lines cool. So we're going to use a pry bar, and we're going to pry the lines out and away from this tube as it's being welded. We're going to keep it away until it cools down. Once it cools, we can bring them back, and then we can put the lines and position them up above the tube like they're supposed to be. Same thing back here. We'll go in steps and keep these lines cool. There's not much welding down under here, so we're going to be okay, but we're going to break it up so those lines stay cool. And that's the main thing, is when you're welding this on this particular side, you go slow. Okay, we just finished at the front, and now we got this area here, which you can see we've already buffed off. And in your kit, you're going to get this L bracket, and it goes right here. It's going to weld to the factory floor support rail and tie into our subframe. It ties everything together when we do that. So this is the position where it's going to go right at the very end here. You're going to weld here, here, and down the sides, here, on the base, and here. You'll see how we do that in a second. Once we weld the L bracket, we're going to move to the outside of the car, where we're going to weld the jacking rail to the rocker rail seam. You're going to do this with strip welding, which basically means 1 1/4 inch weld, skip 2 inches, and then weld again. It's going to look something like this. Okay, when you get to the final, there's going to be 2 gussets. These come in your kit. The small one goes on the passenger side, and the reason why is because we've got the gas lines it's got to clear, brake lines. This larger one is going to go right here at the very end. You're going to put it up in here. It goes at a slight angle. You're going to weld it to the bulkhead, and you're going to weld it to the subframe. It's just an additional gusset. But this side's going to be the smaller one in the kit, because we got to deal with these lines right here. And we want to make sure that we're obviously not running the gussets into the lines. This has to be a welded unit. So this is going to go right here, and it pulls back away from the line, and you're going to reuse the bracket that was originally here to hold the line. That's going to screw back in. But we're going to have a support right here. It's going to get welded here, up the side, and right here. So that's the last piece that we have to put in. Let's go ahead and throw this in. Now, one more thing is we got to buff the paint off right here before we install. Now that we have the welding completed, there's these areas here that we did weld, which we want to clean up a little bit and prep it for paint. So we're going to use a wire brush. We're going to clean the different areas. We're going to end up masking certain areas off and hit it with some paint. It's going to complete the job. Okay, now you got a good idea how to install our subframe connectors on a 93 Mustang. And by the way, it's 79 through 93, all Fox body. This particular kit will fit 912s, 915s, and the 920. Now, just so you know, we do make a 912 and a 915 already welded together for this application. Part number is a 921, and it also comes with the seat supports. If you want to cut your time down a little bit, that might be a faster way of doing it. This procedure takes about 5 to 6 hours to do. With the 921, which means all this is already pre-welded, ready to go, it'll take about 2.5 hours off your time. Just something to think about if you're interested in doing something like this. All right, installation on Mustangs, 79 through 93 Fox bodies, 912, 915, 920s. You got any questions? By all means, give us a call. If you enjoyed this video and are interested in other videos that we may do or other products that we may have, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and check us out on Instagram. Thanks again.